Let's get more on this now from Yasser Louati. He's a spokesperson for the Collective Against Islamophobia in France. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining us. What is this clampdown hoping to achieve, and will it be effective, do you think?
Thank you. First, I'm no longer with the CCIA, but I'm a human rights and civil liberties activist based in Paris. To answer your question, right now the French government is doing exactly what ISIL wants, meaning more repression against the French Muslim community and having punishments applied upon whole communities throughout France. If the French government really wants to crack down on so-called radicalization, first we need to define what do they mean by radicalization, what do they mean by extremism, what do they mean by Salafism. For example, when you have Mr. Patrick Calvar from the domestic intelligence saying that France is on the verge of a civil war because the far right is looking for opportunities to target Muslims, we haven't seen the French government cracking down on the far right. As for shutting down mosques, so far we haven't seen any proof that these mosques are preaching radical ideas, because we don't know what radical ideas mean. And most of the mosques who were shut down in the last winter were actually mosques who had administrative problems with the government, and the state of emergency gave all the legal basis to shut down these mosques and hold the Muslim community responsible.
Do you accept that there is a problem with radicalization? You call it so-called radicalization. Do you accept that it is an issue in France?
There are extreme ideas all over the place in France. They range from people identifying themselves to the far right, to Christianity, to the Jewish religion, and to the Islamic religion. But we have to approach this in a fair and balanced way. We cannot use and apply the term radicalization only when it comes to Muslims, and when at the same time we all know that all studies and research work, and this was even mentioned by Mr. Bernard Cazeneuve, the Minister of Interior, that this so-called radicalization takes place outside of the mosques, and it takes place on social media, and takes place in jail and clandestine assemblies, which is outside of the reach of the Muslim community. So if the French government is really serious about cracking down on this radical rhetoric, let's first wage a war on social media and deconstruct the rhetoric of these terrorist groups. The problem is that these terrorist groups are saying that, see, look at these Western governments cracking down on Muslim citizens, and that's exactly what the French government is doing. So far, if France is failing against ISIL and failed against Al-Qaeda and the GIA before in Algeria, is because France only adopts repressive measures, and this is again decried by our domestic intelligence. And I quote to you a 2013 confidential report saying that the government of France needs to work with communities instead of holding them responsible and targeting them randomly.
Away from the Muslim community in France, how has this gone down? Does it have support across the country?
There are many human rights activists who are deeply worried about these repressive measures, because they know that these measures are first applied to Muslims because they are defenseless and it is easy for public opinion purposes. But once you set a precedent against weak minorities, you apply these laws against the rest. And we saw a clear example after the November attacks. First, the French government, under Manuel Valls and Bernard Cazeneuve, targeted the French Muslims in their mosques, their homes, and their organizations. Within 2 weeks, under the environmental summit in Paris, they launched a violent crackdown on environmentalists, union leaders, human rights activists, and even against social movements. So people who are active in the human rights field are worried. But the wider public opinion in France so far is under such shock that to them they need an enemy. And the government right now is pointing to the French Muslims as the enemy. And of course it is very easy, because Muslims in France don't have the political support or the communication tools to counterattack against the French government in France.
Okay, Yasser Louati, thank you very much for your time.